Greetings and welcome, our chief guest, the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Mr. Ajit Niwat Cabral, and we're delighted to have with us participating Mr. Alan Johnson, linking with us from overseas in Belgium at the moment, but the president incumbent of Ifax, Professor Ho from Singapore, other distinguished speakers and contributors to this very important event. And certainly it is good to be able to host yet another, I'm using the term another, because this is an ongoing series, but of course, the prevailing conditions, as everyone is well aware, makes it necessary for us to use this virtual platform to be able to reach all of you. So welcome again to all of the participants, and we trust that in due course, even more people will be joining us for the CMA Sri Lanka National Management Accounting Conference for this year. And this, while starting today, will continue through tomorrow, Tuesday as well. But this is our inaugural, and we have some very interesting things that will be spoken and attended to, may I say, a recognition of those that have contributed in the realm of business and finance and accounting in Sri Lanka. So we'll come to that a little later. But the theme is very, very important. In as much as everyone feels the pain of the pandemic, what it has wrought, there certainly is also plenty of grumbling, and yet there is a need to look beyond the present. There has to be practical measures adopted. On the one hand, there is a medical aspect, and that's not particularly the concern of those that are gathered here in this context, but business, yes. And the idea is reviving Sri Lanka's economy, COVID-19 and beyond. That's the word, beyond. So this is going to be taking place, as I said, today, the 28th, tomorrow, and then the 29th as well. So we'd like at this juncture to have a formal word or two spoken in welcome. And for that, we would like to invite your attention and to address this audience, Professor Lakshman R. Vatavala, who is certainly not a stranger to anyone. He's a founder president of CMA Sri Lanka, but he's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka and of the Chartered Management Accountants of the United Kingdom, a fellow of CMA, obviously, and amongst others, important positions he has held. He's held office as president of SAFA, the South Asian Federation of Accountants, while professionally he has served in the corporate sector here as well as the government institutions of Sri Lanka. In fact, at one time was the chairman and director general of the Board of Investment. That was some time ago. And he's also been head of the People's Bank of Sri Lanka, while also serving on the boards of several other organizations. So without further ado, on the topic, the role of professional management accountants in reviving the Sri Lankan economy post-COVID-19 and beyond, here's Professor Vatavala.
Good evening to all. Thank you very much, Arun, for that introduction. Our chief guest this evening, Mr. Ajit Niwat Cabral, the Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and of the former State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise Reforms. Mr. Alan Johnson, the President of the International Federation of Accountants. Professor Ho Yu Ki, Associate Provost, Skills Future, Singapore Institute of Technology, and former Professor of Accounting of the National University of Singapore. Our Vice President, Mr. Hennayaka Bandara, who is also Vice President of the South Asian Federation of Accountants. Our council members, President of CS Sri Lanka, Mr. Manil Jayasinghe, distinguished invitees and members, and all those who are attending this very important conference on reviving Sri Lankan economy, COVID-19 and beyond. So let me while welcoming you just say a few words about CMA Sri Lanka. As you all know, CMA is a national professional management accounting body in Sri Lanka, and we have been incorporated by an act of parliament, and we set up in 1999, and where we launched in the year 2000. So we've come a long journey, and I'm happy to say that we have over 18,000 students and 2,500 members, which is really something of great achievement for us, and over 1,000 who have passed our exams and become members. So this is something that we are doing, but today the situation, as you all know, is quite different from what it was earlier. Now it was in the last year, 2020, that we had a very, very difficult year, the COVID-19 pandemic, but I think CMA Sri Lanka had taken the right steps ahead. We were able to go to this new technology of the digital means, which we are now conducting this conference, and where everyone is able to connect up, and we are able to be of great service to our members and also others. And also I'm very happy that Mr. Alan Johnson, the president of Ifax, has been able to connect with us, and also Professor Ho, who's one of our close associates on our advisory board and also chairman of the academic council. So these are some of the various ways that which we have been able to connect. So we really took the right decision at that time, because a lot were saying that we have to wait till this COVID-19 pandemic is over, but we said nothing doing. We need to ensure the sustainability of our organization. We have to look after our students. We have to look after all our clients and everyone, clients, the business organization. So we started the digital education. Some were very reluctant, but we started, and of course at the initial stage we gave it free of charge to our students. This made a radical change in the whole sphere of education, where all our education providers then started providing the education to the students. So I'm happy to say that this really enabled us to get going. Then you have to see whether how we are going to do it. Our staff, they were working from home, the new flexible method of working when there was a lockdown, and we had to provide them with all the necessities that were there in order to do it. And I'm happy to say that all of them were able to adjust to this new environment, enabling us to go forward. So that's a big achievement. Then it's not only education, but we need to conduct the examinations. We were one of the first to go into computer-based testing, and this enabled us. We had joined up with Pearson VUE at that time, and then therefore we were able to now conduct our exams both in the classroom, computer lab, as well as remote. Now this really helped us a great deal. We've been able to go ahead, and even we've just completed some of the exams that we had done on remote basis. So this shows that today the digitalization has taken us into a new dimension. And I think Sri Lanka, this is something that we should really try and get it to everyone throughout the country. And that will really make us different. We will be in touch with all foreign countries. There is no sort of other things to be done. We were really looking at how our performance was going to be with this. But I am happy to tell everyone that although our performance was reduced by 4.5%, our expenditure was much more greatly reduced by 14 to 15%. Now you can see we are talking of reviving the Sri Lankan economy, COVID-19 and beyond. And that's, I think, the major thing that we need to look at. In fact, they say that you have to put accountants on a lean diet, but it's really not only the accountants, the business community, the government, everyone has to go on a lean diet. You have to manage with what you are having and cut down as much as possible. Then we are also one of the first professional educational institutions to start the CMA Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards. I'm very happy that Professor Ho is here. He's the chairman of our panel of judges, heading so many other judges who are there. And this is today we are doing it for the 7th year. Now you must be wondering what is the real purpose of this integrated reporting. I'm indeed very happy that the president of Ifax, Mr. Alan Johnson, for this 2021 our competition, he sent a very valuable message, which we have sent to all our companies and others. So showing the great interest that have been taken by Ifax in the integrated reporting awards, and also the companies preparing the integrated report, because that's one area where the value creation of the organizations are being shown. So I also know that there are a lot of developments. I'm sure our president of Ifax will inform where now the IIRC and Sustainability Accounting Standards Board have got together to form the Value Foundation, which will also improve the reporting systems for companies. So that's, I think, a very great thing. But I just want to tell the governor of the central bank, Mr. Ajit Niwat Cabral, that we should implement this integrated reporting in all government institutions. Today we are talking of the 2020 budget, but the majority of the funding in that role is almost 60 to 70% is all for government projects. But I think the private sector is giving various suggestions. I'm sure they will not ask for funding, but that they will see as to how they can improve the exports, the productivity, and other areas, cut down costs, and make this a success. So why I'm saying this is that every government ministry must tell us the value they are creating to the society, because the money is allocated, but if they don't show the value that they have created to the society, the people are lost as to what is happening to this money. So I think this is a very good method by which this could be done, and I'm sure that our Governor Cabral would be able to take that forward, because he too is someone from the accounting profession, someone who understands the figures and will be able to give the right solutions to the country at this time. We are in a very difficult time. So that's one area which we are trying to do. Then what the next one is our Cost and Management Accounting Standards Board. We have just put out our framework. I think that is something that is really required, especially in this situation where we are really in very great difficulty. I know Governor Cabral would mention in his speech all those matters that are there, where we are really talking of two areas. One is the managerial costing, where the companies and business organizations would be able to follow. And the other one is the social costing, where the society will have to know really the cost of a product. Today, all of you know that even we are having price control for bread. But if they have to maintain records in order to calculate the cost, our Companies Act is nowhere near that. They just say maintain books of record. That is not sufficient. Today, you must maintain the cost records properly. Then we will be able to do it. We will also show how the product has to be costed. What are the items that will go into a cost? Some of them put all their overheads into these products, and then the society has to pay for it. So these are, the efficiency is not there, productivity is not there. Ultimately, the society has to pay for these large costs. So I think this will really make a radical change in the method of which costing will be there. It will save money, it will save wastage. And CMA Sri Lanka, the body incorporated by an act of parliament, will be able to bring this and hand it over to the government so that they can implement it for the betterment of the society and also the running of business organizations. As you know, there are many recommendations that are made. Management accountants are operational people. They are really involved in the business, the day-to-day running of business. So that's why we have to really play a major role, the management accountants, in order to revive this economy. So they have to do. But I must say that the government has really done certain things. I must say that even the Cabinet of Ministers in 2014 approved the CMA Sri Lanka qualification for recruitment to the government. That was in 2014, because I was reading a report of Transparency International, and they said that companies, that governments that have employed professional accountants, the corruption rate, the wastage rate, and the productivity has been very much more. But unfortunately, the government lost this opportunity. When the Cabinet of Ministers, when the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance has recommended that they should be taken to, they could apply for government jobs, till this year, they did not do it. So within 6 years, they have lost about 250, 300 professional accountants who could have joined the government and made a real change in the financial reporting, financial controlling of financial expenditure and other means. Then there is also another report made by the Committee of Public Enterprises of the severe lack of cost control in the government state corporations, and that immediately they should act on this and ensure that there are qualified accountants employed in this. But those have not been taken in. So today we need to implement all these things. So that's why I think that if you want to revive the Sri Lankan economy, these have to be implemented. So I think as a profession, we have a very major role to play. I'm indeed happy that today, I think our governor of the central bank, he was the earlier state minister of money and capital markets, but he had to sacrifice that because the government wanted him to play this very major role as the governor of the central bank. I think that is a big challenge that he has accepted, and we are confident. And as from our side, as professional accountants, we are there to give you all the support. And we know that the mechanism by which how these good places could be made viable, how they could be run, and how the country can get on the right track. I know that there is a shortage of foreign exchange. Our CMA has been concentrating on the SME sector. We set up what is called this COVID-19 SME Development Committee, and this has taken great strides. One of the main achievements that we did was to make the recommendations to set up a credit guarantee institution to give money to enable them to get funding for the SME sector and the entrepreneurs. Now, this has been approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. We sent it through the Ministry of Industries, and now they are going on it, and most probably by early next year, that this fund will get into operation. So you can see how much that we have been able to join with the business sector, the chambers of commerce, the professional bodies, and industry experts to do this sort of thing. So these are great measures from our side that we have been able to take, and I'm sure that this budget will give a lot of incentives to the SME sector. One of the things is we want to increase the exports of the SME sector, and then where they can join up with what is called the export houses, who will help these small scale businesses to do their exports. The other one is where the larger firms get together with the smaller firms and buy their products and then enable them to get a market. So there are a lot of schemes that are there, and I'm sure even the Honorable Prime Minister said that the backbone of the economy of this country is the SME sector. So we need to now ensure that they are put on the right path. We have done, and we are one by one, I'm sure we can do it. And I know that Governor Ajit Niwat Cabral has been to our committee. He has addressed our committee. He has addressed many of the seminars, and I know that he knows this sector very well, and I'm sure that he will be able to provide solutions to it. So let me once again thank all our key people who are present today, especially our president, those from overseas, Mr. Alan Johnson, for sparing his valuable time, for being with us, because it's a very big encouragement. We would have been certainly hosted you in Sri Lanka and given the Sri Lankan hospitality, but unfortunately, due to this current situation, we can do it. But I'm sure when things are better, that we will be able to do it. And of course, Professor Ho, who is there, who's been a regular visitor to Sri Lanka and helped us a great deal. And he has we have given one of the biggest tasks to him, chairman of our academic board, that is to see that our syllabuses are done properly, our students are of the international standing. And I think that we are also following what Ifax is doing, so that we will be able to produce a very, very competent management accountant, because I'm very happy that we are members of the International Federation of Accountants, a local body recognized internationally, and we are now on the same league as all the others in the accounting profession. So also I must thank Mr. our Governor Ajit Niwat Cabral for kindly accepting, because I know when I gave the invitation at that time, he was the State Minister of Money and Capital Markets and State Enterprise. Today, I think this position is, I think, one of the most important at the moment, whether it is exchange crisis or whatever it is. We have full confidence in you that you will be able to solve this, and the private sector will be behind you, because I think the private sector should be taken into confidence, because they will support in all these development efforts. And I'm sure that we will be able to revive the economy without any problem. So thank you and all the very best.
Incisive remarks from Professor Lakshman R. Vatawala. Thank you very much. So there were some cautionary notes that were sounded, but also some very practical points were brought to the fore, which help us to appreciate that there is a role to be played by the management accountants. And did we not hear the emphasis placed on SMEs? Well, looking beyond COVID, that's probably where the focus might very well be. Time now to sound the keynote, for which we have the president of the International Federation of Accountants, who was inducted into office just recently, we might say, it's about a year ago, November 2020. And previously he served as the deputy president. And he was nominated to the Ifax board by the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, or ACCA. And he has served in the corporate realm as well, but of some relevance to those who are in Sri Lanka. A very well-known name in this country is Unilever. Well, in years gone by, Mr. Alan Johnson has served as the chief audit executive for the Unilever Group and also served as chief financial officer of Unilever's Global Foods. And Mr. Johnson was a member of the Ifax Professional Accountants in Business Committee some years ago. And he's a member of the ACCA's Market Oversight Committee and also served as the chair of the Accountants for Business Global Forum until 2018. Now, the theme of his talk, or the keynote, is a strong recovery, an empowered profession, and a sustainable future. Three important words. Let's hear it from Mr. Alan Johnson.
Thank you, Arun. President Vatawala, Vice President Bandara, Honorable Central Bank Governor Ajith Cabral, Professor Yuki, council members and distinguished guests, good evening to you, and thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. Given the circumstances that we all face, I'm sure we all regret that we're not able to be together, as the president has said, but nevertheless, it's really an honor that I'm able to be with you, at least virtually. So as the global voice of the professional accounting organization, Ifax represents more than 3 million professional accountants through our 180 member bodies across over 135 countries. And our mission is quite simple, actually. It's to serve the public interest by enhancing the relevance, the reputation, and the value of the profession across the world. And essentially, our work falls under three categories. One is that we represent an advocate for the profession as its global voice. We support and promote the development, adoption, and implementation of high-quality international standards. And we equip, or we help to equip, the profession through our member bodies, such as CMA Sri Lanka, and all the professionals that they represent for the future. But what we aim to do is only possible with our member bodies, such as CMA Sri Lanka, with our associates, and with our affiliate organizations, because alone we can't do it. Together with the resources that our members and affiliates and associates offer, we have the geographic reach to make transformation happen. And as has been said, CMA Sri Lanka is a member of Ifax, and we're very proud of that, but it's also a member of the South Asian Federation of Accountants and the Confederation of Asian and Pacific Accountants. And these connections are crucial to the profession and to Sri Lanka. Indeed, these connections define our global profession. And I'd like to thank you for the great work you've been doing since your inauguration in 2000. So the topic at hand is the profession's role in a sustainable economic recovery from COVID-19, and, as was said by Arun, beyond. Now, sometimes when we use the word sustainability, it means different things. Sometimes it means green finance. Sometimes it actually means strong corporate governance, foundations of equitable and lasting economic growth. And others, quite understandably, think foremost of the need for the measures that the public needs to take to address some of the challenges, particularly the health challenge that the world has been through in the past 18, 19 months. And of course, many others think about climate change and the actions we need to take there. But all of these are important, and they're at play today in discussing a sustainable future. And each one has a dynamic effect that affects the others. And we know that the UN 2030 agenda for the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, fortunately is the clearest and most comprehensive framework for these issues. And on this point, it is quite eloquent. It says, the SDGs are integrated and indivisible and balance the three dimensions of sustainable development, which are whether they be economic, whether they be social, or indeed, whether they be environmental. So we can see for ourselves that the climate crisis and indeed digitalization, which is helping us be together today, are both accelerating at the same time. And it's clear that the effects of each will influence the other, and in turn shape and reshape our lives. And the same, unfortunately, can be said about COVID-19, and indeed every other public health emergency that may come our way in the future. But in fact, the exact shape of the future will depend on the choices we make ourselves, and of course, the enormous externalities which are simply unpredictable. But as a profession, we can and we must use what we see now to make informed decisions that build sustainability into foundational systems and institutions. So I'd like to highlight three themes. One is the demand for sustainability information, which Professor Vatavalla has already alluded to, retooling and reskilling our profession, and reorienting society towards a more equitable and sustainable society. So first, let me talk about sustainability information. Many stakeholders want more information about an entity's operations than they can currently find in the financial statements, whether these statements are internal or indeed external. This information matters not only to investors, but also to capital markets, to regulators, and indeed to society. These stakeholders want to understand economic, social, and environmental impacts, along, of course, with the traditional financial impacts. But they want this information to be consistent, to be comparable, and to be reliable. And as we know, accounting is the language that businesses use to communicate this information. And as professional accountants, we are already fluent in this because accounting is our language. So we can help meet greater demand for this information. As professional accountants in business, responsible for financial and strategic planning and performance management. As board members with oversight responsibilities and duties, and as external stakeholders who interpret the information in the disclosures, and indeed as public practitioners in providing the assurance services that we can advise companies how to provide the information to meet the stakeholders' demands. In short, professional accountants are embedded across the whole reporting supply chain. So Ifax recently published a review of the sustainability assurance market at the global level. It was a report entitled The State of Play in Sustainability Assurance. And we could see some problematic trends, shall we say. Our data suggests that only half of the companies worldwide are publishing sustainability information that is subject to any assurance. And for those that do obtain assurance, it is often provided by consultants and others outside the accountancy profession who do not have the same professional accountant's unique combination of skills, qualifications, experience, and a professional ethical obligation to act in the public interest. And this could be a potential investor protection issue and could signal the emergence of a new expectation gap for our profession. So the report findings also gave a cause for concern for the potential effect, therefore, on public trust, which will decline if assurance fails to deliver. It is simply not in the interest of the public or the profession to allow assurance to be provided by people who are far less qualified than we are. The global nature of our profession with our high quality international standards should help us understand and respond to the failure of the current system of piecemeal and voluntary sustainability disclosures. So Ifax agenda for reporting, for corporate reporting and sustainability focuses on advocating for a global approach to sustainability standards. Standards that reduce the risk of a fragmentation of regulation and build on a standard setting structure that has already got good legitimacy. This is why we support the creation of an international sustainability standards board alongside the IASB under the IFRS Foundation. And we're pleased to see continued progress towards its creation. But along with many challenges come enormous opportunities too. If we as a profession act decisively to give shape to sustainability reporting and to provide ourselves or prepare ourselves to provide emerging assurance services, both internally within the business and through external audit, we will be able to build a system that better serves stakeholders' interests, creates more value, indeed more sustainable value, and in which we have a substantial competitive advantage. So this brings me to the second theme, which is retooling and reskilling the profession. In this pandemic, as professional accountants, we have found ourselves needing to do the same work differently under the public health restrictions. But in future, doing the same work differently is not enough. Not for the profession if we want to contribute to a long-term sustainable recovery. Our profession must look to do different work entirely. And the accountant of the future will need to perform new roles, often with advisory responsibilities, rather than just exclusively technical ones. And our profession will need to become more multidisciplinary as the expertise of non-traditional contributors, such as climate and computer scientists, data analysts, engineers, supply chain experts, etc., become essential to our daily work. And this is an opportunity because although technology is automating old processes and generating new ones that don't always need the skills that we have traditionally practiced, these developments will always create the need for trusted advisors with the skill sets and, most importantly, the integrity and professional ethics of a professional accountant. And we know that wherever economic growth is sustainable, these qualities will be needed and indeed would be prized. So I'd like to emphasize the importance of stepping into advisory roles, particularly for smaller businesses, as Arun Dias has already mentioned. SMEs are the companies that do not necessarily have the resources they need to handle complex business environments. And these tasks are bound to become more complicated, particularly as sustainability reporting becomes widespread and indeed ultimately mandatory. So we need to use our digital tools and competencies to help businesses grow sustainably to create jobs. We must also use these tools and competencies to support good public financial management and to promote trust in institutions at a moment of great need for public trust. And the connections between these issues would require us to think of them as a whole and to better prepare professional accountants to contribute to a future that is not only more sustainable, but more prosperous for all. The professional accountancy organizations play an essential role. They are respected by stakeholders in government, in business, and indeed in society. And no one else is in a better position to represent the profession and its public interest mandate than CMA Sri Lanka. And professional accountants at all stages of their careers, as well as students and aspiring accountants, need the professional accountancy organizations to direct a curriculum for education and training that reflects the new and emerging demands, not only relating to sustainable development, reporting, and assuring non-financial information, but broader areas such as the use of data, both external and internal, to drive business decisions and competitive strategies, understanding consumers' behaviors, efficient supply chains, etc. Our role as professional accountants is so broad and critical in the development of sustainable economies and the creation of value. Education and training are the starting point for the transformation of our skills, and we must undertake swiftly and with careful attention the evolving demands on the profession. Third, we need to think of the profession's role in a sustainable recovery as part of a fundamental reorientation of society towards sustainability and fairness. Our jobs as servants of the public interest is to ensure that our profession helps create a better world for all people. Our role relates to the resilience of society as a whole through sustainable value creation, trust and fairness in institutions, and a healthy natural environment, and to help businesses and the public sector, governments, etc., to understand better how to assess and manage risks. Consider the importance of startups, micro enterprises, and SMEs. They are and will remain the backbone of the global economy. They are responsible for around 80 to 90% of job creation around the world. And they are and have been critical to the successful development of the Sri Lankan economy over the past 2 decades. However, these businesses are more vulnerable than large firms to disruption, as they tend to have tighter margins and less access to financing. So one of the critical roles we have as a profession is to help SMEs get access to resources and finances. This is an issue not only for businesses and their millions of employees, but it's also an issue for large firms because they critically depend on smaller firms at every point in their supply chain. So helping SMEs to help the economy to create a sustainable economic development is good. And that's what we should be thinking of. We have the professional skills, we have the mindset, and with the right retooling and reskilling, we can help build sustainability into the foundation of the global and regional and local economies. CMA Sri Lankan members working in business and the public sector are in unique positions to help create and shape corporate and public policies, to channel resources behind investments to deliver long-term sustainable value, to set sustainable goals and targets, and to measure performance along the journey. This is at the core of the management accounting profession's role, an even more exciting and critical role given today's challenges. And what I'd like to say to you all today is that as accountants in business, you have a critical role to play to encourage or even demand corporate decisions that ensure companies deliver long-term value for everyone, not just for the shareholders or indeed for the owners, but also for the communities in which they operate, because it's only by doing so that we will create a sustainable world. And talking about sustainability, I would like to recognize the CMA leadership in establishing the annual CMA Excellence in Integrated Reporting Awards in 2014. And I'd like to congratulate you and all the winners of these important awards. And when we talk about sustainability, we should also look at public investment as a means for greater and more sustainable economic growth, because it is simply an issue of trust and fairness. The pandemic has brought severe economic setbacks, which have prompted massive public investments in programs and institutions to serve public needs. But ordinary people will judge the efforts of the public sector not just by whether the economy has bounced back, but also by the equality, inclusiveness, and sustainability of the recovery. And the profession's continued dedication to integrity in public financial management, ensuring transparency in decision-making and accountability to citizens remains crucial. And that's what your president mentioned earlier. We should never forget the important role of the public sector plays in stimulating economic development. And our work in public service and the collaboration between professional accountancy organizations and public authorities is essential. And reorienting society means, perhaps most importantly, rethinking and reshaping the relationship between humanity and the natural environment. Sadly, today, so far, the world has lost over 4.7 million lives to COVID. But so far, it is an unthinkable tragedy. But we must never forget that over 5 million people worldwide die every year from the effects of air pollution alone. Nor can we forget the increasingly devastating effects of the climate crisis, which has no regard for whether the world is already in one deep crisis or another. We've all seen the devastating effects of climate change around the world, and it is very significant here in Sri Lanka, and its effects threaten to impact both human and natural systems, as roughly 50% of the population in Sri Lanka live in low-lying coastal areas and are at risk of future sea level rises. So action is needed urgently by every country, by everyone, everywhere. And that was stated very clearly at the United Nations Assembly in New York last week. We must ensure that sustainable growth no longer comes with sustainable destruction of humanity. Sustainable growth must come to mean growth that take account of and accounts for the externalities. And as professional accountants, we can help address these by ensuring decisions, performance, measurement, reporting, and accountability are transparent and aligned to long-term sustainable results. So these three themes, growing demand for sustainable information, retooling and reskilling our profession, and reorienting society are deeply connected to each other and to the prospects of a sustainable economic recovery. Stakeholders are demanding it. Our roles and skills will need to grow and change as a result. And to fulfill our public interest mandate, this must be placed in the urgent context of the need to change course as the world struggles with terrible threats to livelihoods, to the environment, and potentially to entire societies. But I would like to just say one more thing, that despite all the uncertainty, there is one thing that must not, and hopefully will not change, and that is our profession's commitment to ethics. The International Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants underpins everything we do. This is what makes it possible for us to influence public policies and gives us the right to speak out on issues that are relevant to our profession, to the economy, to sustainability and society at large. And I'm sure the governor of your central bank is here today because he also recognizes the value of our profession with respect to its ethical behavior. We must continue to work towards the global adoption and implementation of our ethical principles. Otherwise, we will simply lose the right to be heard and taken seriously. So to conclude, not only is there an incredibly important need for the profession to lead on sustainability to fulfill our public interest mandate, but there's also an incredible opportunity for us to help those in private and public sectors make the tough choices that are inevitably facing every country as a result of today's pandemic. But not only the pandemic. Let us use this opportunity to do what is right for the long-term benefit of all. I believe that our profession can create a better, more resilient world with stronger economies and fairer societies by doing so. So thank you again for giving me the honor of joining you virtually today. I do hope that I will be able to come to Sri Lanka before my president term ends. It has been a privilege so far to be president of Ifax, especially now. This is a time of many challenges, but also many opportunities. So I'd like to thank every member of CMA Sri Lanka for the great work that you've been doing. And I send you all my very best wishes. And I hope that you keep well and keep safe. Thank you.
Thank you too, Mr. Alan Johnson. And we would like to appreciate that sustainability is not a buzzword. Neither is there a formulaic response that might bring on the feature called sustainability. It is an individual responsibility and calls for a professional approach, as we were very well reminded. And Mr. Johnson was helping us to appreciate that there are some shortcomings that have been notable, and that there is what might be called an ethical obligation, along with the need to recognize that less qualified people should not be in the business. And the piecemeal attempts to bring solutions does not ensure sustainability, but something a great deal more, and there has to be a great deal of thinking and planning. And we will help to appreciate the matter of retooling and also multidisciplinary, equipping the profession with multidisciplinary skills. And yes, the natural environment, we were reminded, is very much part of the scheme of things. Well, a lot to think about, but right now we move to the address by our chief guest, who in a manner has been repeatedly introduced by those previously who spoke, and we are grateful to have with us Mr. Ajit Niwat Cabral. And as was mentioned, his reappointment or his incumbency into the governor's chair again has been of recent days. Just a few weeks ago, until a few weeks ago, he served as a state minister of money and capital markets and state enterprise reforms while serving as a member of parliament with the government of Sri Lanka. Now, reviving Sri Lanka's economy, COVID-19 and beyond, very topic. Mr. Cabral.
Thank you, Arun, and thank you, Lakshman. I'm delighted to be here this evening, and I want to say a special thank you to my friend, Mr. Lakshman Vatawala, who has been a tower of strength in the field of accountancy in our country. And I think he has been a colossus in this field. And I'm particularly glad that he has been able to have the support of the IFAC as well as other institutions in taking forward CMA, which I know is going from strength to strength. I'm also particularly pleased to meet with Professor Ho and also with Mr. Alan Johnson, with whom now I had an immediate bond, mainly because I too have been involved with IFAC activities many, many moons ago. Please don't ask me how long ago. And also with the other regional bodies like CAPA and SAFA, with whom I've had some excellent relationships. So I'm particularly glad that I can kind of be reincarnated in this profession. And I'm particularly glad that we could do that today with so many accountants in the field participating at the CMA's national conference. I'm also happy that Lakshman and his team have chosen a very important topic, which is the revival of the Sri Lankan economy. It is no secret that a revival is definitely something that is of a priority right now, because the world has gone through some serious readjustment, some serious debacles, and that has impacted every single country. Emerging countries have also been, in a way, suffering quite a bit. And now we need to focus on a revival in the short term, in the medium term, and also in the long term. So it's important that we recognize the role of accountants, on whom I have a great deal of confidence. And maybe it's time for us to also see how best we could use the accountancy services as well as the knowledge that they have to help us with this revival, which is vital for all our countries. I was listening intently to Mr. Alan Johnson, who gave the reasons as to why we should be concentrating on revival using the right tools and the right people. I think it was a very important chord that you struck, in the sense that if you have the right people on the job, half the problem is solved. And that's something that we need to now recognize, as well as give ear to what Lakshman has been saying, that we should use those who are competent, those who are qualified, those who have the experience to help us in this journey, which is, I can tell you, going to be quite arduous in time to come. So let's get down to the topic. What do we see as the priorities in the revival? Right now, I can see we have had a downturn, particularly because of the lockdown. But one bit of good news is that in Sri Lanka, we have seen the growth taking shape even in the course of the pandemic. This year, in the first half, we have recorded an 8% growth, mainly because of the platform as well as the base being quite low last year as a result of the pandemic and the negative growth that we had. But nevertheless, 8% growth is a substantial one. And it tells us the story that we are now moving away from the contraction of the economy and into a growth model once again. Important message, and it's something that we should be conscious of, but it also tells us that we have a platform to do a lot more than what we are doing now. The other part of good news is that there is a lot of spare capacity within our economy right now. Most of the sectors are presently performing at levels which are below optimum. In particular, the sector such as tourism is almost at zero. And that tells us, once again, that we have an awesome opportunity of making use of that space, which can then deliver a great deal of results. So we have to concentrate on where we have the gaps, where we have the potential, and where we have the capacity. That means we won't have to invest new and fresh funds, and we could leverage on the funds that are already invested in order to make new avenues of incomes for the country through those means. So we had to open it out. So opening out the country after the lockdown is a priority. And I have been a proponent that we should open out as fast as possible with, of course, the COVID-related protocols in place. Everyone can do business even under the worst of circumstances. The COVID taught us a new normal. The COVID taught us that we can still go ahead and do most of what we were doing, of course, with changes in the way we do those activities. So even in the case of our businesses, in the case of our activities, there will be opportunities and methods by which we could do so. So we owe it to the country, first of all, to open out carefully, so that we don't have to once again having to deal with the COVID itself. But in so doing, we should make sure that we can continue our activities as we go along. There is now a need that we improve our macro fundamentals. Our macro fundamentals took quite a beating during the COVID period, and particularly during the last 2 years, we have seen some numbers getting a bit of flack as well as some tension, which we now need to reverse gently. But the most important thing about that is that we have to do it all together. There is sometimes a temptation that we concentrate on one or two macro fundamentals and attempt to improve those so that we can show some quick results. But I think what is most important is to have a journey which is more measured, which is carried out in such a way that we have all aspects of the economy, the real economy, the external sector, the fiscal sector, the monetary sector, as well as the banking sector, all moving in tandem so that we can achieve slow but sure gains. And that's another important consideration in the revival of the country. So I would be concentrating as the governor to ensure that all these macro fundamentals move in tandem together on a trajectory that is going to be stability oriented. The most important aspect right now, when you are confronted with a large number of challenges, is to bring stability. I think we are all into cricket, and one way of looking at it is in a 20-over match, if in the first 4 to 5 overs, if you lose 4 wickets, you will use the next 2 to 3 overs to stabilize and to play down and to make sure that you don't lose any further wickets. So I think in the times of challenges, such as what we are experiencing today, right now, there is a time where we need to consolidate, where we need to make sure that we are able to regroup and get stability back so that we can launch a new wave of development thereafter. We have some ambitious plans for our country. We have a public investment, which is quite carefully structured to be able to give new support to our people, particularly in the provision of water and the provision of new infrastructure. But at the same time, we have also developed the laws as well as the structures for private investment to move into the country. We have identified certain new areas like the pharmaceutical sector, like the Hambantota zone, like the Colombo Port City Commission. All these are new avenues of development which we need to now nurture so that new investment could flow in. There is also an attempt that the government, and we are supporting it fully, to ensure that Sri Lanka's underutilized assets are also utilized better. That's another area where we can promote new investments to come into the country. By doing so, I'm sure we can have new ventures as well as a new canvas on which the new developments could take place. So we're excited about it. We're excited about the possibility that tourism can once again regain its grandeur. We were a country in 2018 which had about 2.5 million tourists who were entering Sri Lanka, enjoying the situations in our country, enjoying the attractions, and also providing us with an income of around $4.5 billion. Now, what this condition has done to our country is that that has been stalled, but we now have the opportunity of regaining that in time to come. When that comes back, there would be a lot of opportunities that the Sri Lankan government would also derive and the private sector could derive. So we have to create the space for that to happen. And I believe in the next few months, through the vaccination program, which has been one of the most successful programs in the world, we are hoping to be able to open out the country faster so that we can invite more and more tourists to come. Perhaps we can even have Mr. Alan Johnson and Professor Ho coming by for the next program that Lakshman could organize, which means that we have then been able to set up the infrastructure in a tangible manner for people to benefit by the Sri Lankan hospitality. Now let's get down to the way in which the accountants, particularly the cost and management accountants, could play a role in this revival. As Lakshman quite rightly mentioned, we have a large number of small and medium sector enterprises in our country, all of which need some very clear support, particularly in a time of this nature, where they have had some very heavy battering on their balance sheets. So they need to be nurtured. They need to be carefully taken through. The government has already given several moratoriums, which has helped them to tide through this time. But that is not enough. We now need fresh capital to be brought in, new equity funds to come in. We need to have new structures that will hold their hand to move forward with more focus. We need to ensure that the country's structures would assist them in the short term as well as in the long term. So what Lakshman mentioned with regard to the avoiding and the elimination of corruption, the costing systems, the need to ensure that waste is removed and the reforms are brought in is very, very vital at this time. So I believe that role could be fulfilled by the CMA accountants as well as the chartered accountants, whom I know are already here and sitting out at this program as well. They have a very, very important role to play in delivering these kinds of services to the country as well as to the organizations that need their services. The SME sector is vital. We all know that. At the same time, in order to make sure that they stay afloat and stay viable, they need to be supported fully. We have already asked the banks to do that. And as the governor, I'm hoping to put forward a comprehensive plan, which the country as well as all the stakeholders would be invited to follow. And we'll be doing that on the 1st of October. And in that plan, we are identifying the different aspects of work as well as support that each sector should undertake so that we can have a cohesive program going forward. We need to, in the case of the SMEs, use new instruments that have not been utilized sufficiently in our country. For example, the equity support, the private equity support, the credit guarantee support. All those would need some heavy interventions, which we look forward to see Lakshman and his team providing. So I see a challenge. It's not going to be an easy challenge. We have been beset with several new challenges as well. And going forward, these will have to be met. These will have to be met with sustainable solutions. These will have to be met with all the parties working together in order to deliver stability as well as growth. Both these go hand in hand. Stability is most important, but no stability can sustain itself unless there is a steady growth also following. So both these need to be nurtured as well as supported. And I believe Lakshman knows that when we go to the revival process as well as beyond, like what your team has been talking about, we need to focus on both these aspects. So we look to you and your team as well as your other stakeholders all over the world to give us that support as a government, as a central bank, and we are confident that you would be doing that so that we can all go forward together. So thank you, Lakshman. Thank you to all of you. And we hope that we will continue this dialogue as well as continue to stay focused on the mission ahead. And I'm sure that with your support as well as your guidance and the awesome infrastructure that you wield through the various different organizations that you represent and you can draw support from, we can have a journey which is a confident journey and which will provide the support to our countrymen to go forward and reach prosperity that we are all yearning for. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Governor of the Central Bank. And that was a hearty endorsement of this enterprise when you refer to it as an awesome infrastructure. Well, it is business at hand, and it is something that deserves fullest engagement on the part of the professionals, as we were helped to appreciate. The times ahead are difficult, but it will need all hands on deck for whatever the appropriate equivalent term might be. Which brings us now to a rather interesting and engaging moment where one of our speakers today, our keynote speaker, in fact, is going to be awarded with a special recognition. And for that purpose, I would like to invite the president of CMA Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman R. Watawala, to speak.
Thank you, Arun. I must thank our chief guest, Governor Ajit Niwar Cabral, for that very, I think, the thought-provoking address. I'm sure everyone has to follow in these footsteps if they are really going to do it. But let me also announce here that Governor Ajit Niwar Cabral has been appointed as a patron of the CMA Sri Lanka. So we are very thankful for you. I think you accepted it at the time that you were the state minister of money and capital markets and state enterprise. And we are very much happy that as a governor of the central bank, that we will be having you as a patron. And I must mention here that at the time that we were formed, one of the first organizations at that time, Mr. Ajit Niwar Cabral was the governor of the central bank, and he really recognized our qualification at that time. So I think that was something he did long time ago, and we have now been able to live up to his expectations. And I'm very happy that we have been able to appoint him, and he has accepted the appointment to be a patron of CMA Sri Lanka. Thank you, Mr. Ajit Niwar Cabral, and we are very hopeful that your support will help us to go forwards. Then, of course, we have a very important announcement. You can see a certificate that is here because today we have our keynote speaker and the president of the International Federation of Accountants, and we had no other way of honoring him, but we really thought that even though it is virtually, we can really make a significant manner by which we can honor you. So the Council of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka is very proud to elect, and we certify that Mr. Alan Johnson, the President, International Federation of Accountants, was admitted as a fellow member of, and is designated Fellow of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. Of course, we are proud that if you are able to use our designation, FCMA, maybe in Sri Lanka we use it as FCMA, but I suppose overseas one would use it as FCMA Sri Lanka. So we are very proud that we have a very leading member who has received the fellowship, the #1 person in the accountants that he mentioned, 3 million accountants. So the #1 accountant has received the membership of the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka. So this is given under the common seal of the Institute, dated 27 September 2021, signed by the President and a Council member. Our congratulations and best wishes to Mr. Alan Johnson, and we deeply appreciate your acceptance of the fellowship of our institute. And I'm sure that this will also bring us closer to the International Federation of Accountants, as well as your own body, the ACCA, with whom we already have a MOU, and many of them are also following the exams and qualifying as ACCA professionals also. So my congratulations and best wishes, Alan. I think sure you may have a few comments to make. That this would be an opportunity for you.
Thank you very much, President Watawala, and may I also thank your council for bestowing this honor. I accept this obviously on behalf of the International Federation of Accountants, because whatever I've achieved is because I've had a wonderful career as a professional accountant over many years, and it's just a privilege that I was elected in November last year to lead Ifax. But of course, Ifax is more than just the president. It's about all of us. It's about all of your members. It's about everything you all do to help the world become a better place, to help economies become more sustainable, and to ensure that we can all look back and feel proud that we have made some contribution to making this place better for all. So on behalf of Ifax, I really deeply thank you for honoring me in this way. And I am delighted that you have been a member of Ifax for a number of years. As I said in my remarks, you're a very important member to Ifax as we pursue our global agenda of enhancing the reputation of our profession. So it's with deep satisfaction, but with humility that I accept becoming a member of FCMA, and I will use the designation with pride. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alan Johnson. I think we are very grateful to you, and I'm sure it's indeed a very big honor for us to have you as a fellow member of our institute. Just before we move forward, Arun, for the next one, as I said earlier, Governor Ajit Niwat Cabral has been appointed as a patron of our institute. So maybe we would like a few words from him, because he's been closely associated with us for a long time.
Thank you, Lakshman. It's always an honor and a privilege to get back to my original profession, and being a patron in the CMA is an honor that I take with great pride. I thank you as well as your council, and I'm deeply touched by your gesture. I know I always go back to my fundamentals whenever I have a issue to sort out, and the accounting background as well as the accounting reach that we have with fundamentals is always a very, very healthy one. And I like the idea that I can still retain my professional membership in all these institutions. So I still maintain that, and I'm proud to do that. And I hope that it will hold me even in good stead, even in the current responsibility that I have to discharge. So I want to say thank you to persons like Mr. Alan Johnson, who keep the accountancy flag flying. I know you have 3 million accountants to be father to. I'm one of them. And I'm happy that with the leadership that you and your council is giving to the global accounting profession, that we can all be proud that we are members of that very, very important profession, as well as that fraternity. So Lakshman, being a member of the CMA is also a great pride, and also being nominated to be a patron is even greater pride. And I want to thank all of you and your entire council for the honor that you have bestowed on me. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, and our congratulations. And again, it was mentioned that Alan has responsibility for 3 million. Well, we don't have that number associated with us this afternoon or this evening over here. We have somewhere in the region of 300 people. And although you're not able to hear, we can trust that you sense that there has been a warm round of applause. That's for both appointments. Thank you. Yes, as we said, or as Professor Watawala said, we have more to come. And this is an occasion where we recognize, as CMA usually does, the business excellence that has been contributed by 12 recipients on this occasion. So this is part of the annual program under the aegis of CMA Sri Lanka, where some individuals are selected and evaluated for the contribution they have made to the profession and are bestowed with this honor. So we should start off now. For obvious reasons, we cannot have them come up on a stage and receive anything. But The identity of the recipients will be revealed on screen, and I'll be happy to introduce them one by one. And presiding over this, of course, will be Professor Watawala, but not that he has to do anything in particular, but we recognize that he will be watching on as those names are read and the individuals inducted or honored rather with the award. So we start off with the Executive Director of the Profitability Analytics Center of Excellence, or PACE, an independent non-profit professional organization dedicated to helping organizations make better, more informed decisions. That's Dr. Rafe Lawson, who is an alumnus of the Leonard Stern School of Business, New York University. And Rafe is also an internationally recognized thought leader in the field of management accounting and has presented extensively all around the world. Following Dr. Lawson is a fellow member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, the Institute of Certified Management Accountants of Sri Lanka, and also the Institute of Accounting Technicians of Sri Lanka. 45 years of experience in the profession, managing partner of...
Are you announcing the name and after that? Is it okay?
Yeah, with the name will come the
Okay.
name will come the image. Yes. Okay, we continue. 45 years of experience in the accounting profession, managing partner of Ranavira Associates Chartered Accountants, and also managing director of Ascent Advisory Partners Private Limited, Mr. Atula Ranavira. He's also a member of the Faculty of Taxation of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka, and he was also the alternate chairman of the last taxation committee of CA Sri Lanka. That's Mr. Atula Ranavira. Next is a gentleman with more than 25 years of experience in 3 of the big 4 professional services firms. The name, Channa Manoharan.
Excuse me, if you say the name first, then he will have the photograph appearing. Okay.
Okay, so Channa Manoharan, one who's passionate about growing knowledge and innovation in the BPM realm in Sri Lanka, and has contributed vitally. He's the chair of the Strategy Council of SLASCOM and also serves as a member of the advisory board of the Global Trade and Investment Forum of SLASCOM. And Channa is also a member of the leadership team and COO and advisory leader for PricewaterhouseCoopers Sri Lanka and the Maldives. We follow with Hasita Premaran. Hasita is the Group Finance Director of Brandix Group. He leads the overall finance function of the group and is also responsible for strategy and long-range planning. Managing Director of Brandix India Apparel City, and he also overlooks all joint ventures and investments of the Brandix Group. Then we have John Victor Nanda Korea, who carries with him 45 years of experience in accounting, finance, and management. And he's a financial controller, or has been, with the CGE Alstom Group in Nigeria for a period, and subsequently the finance minister, finance manager of Associate Battery Manufacturers Ceylon Limited until his retirement. Yes, so that's Nanda Korea. Nelson Nagasinghe has played a pioneering role in establishing accounting practices in the south of Sri Lanka in Matra, as way back as the early 1980s, and has certainly been supporting the national need for expanding the competencies in professional accounting, and has been vitally involved with CMA. Nihal De Silva is the managing partner of BR De Silva and Company, and he has been an active member in the Institute and was elected to the Council of CA Sri Lanka in 1990 and served 4 years there. And he has written and contributed much in the way of articles to professional journals, and AAT Sri Lanka has benefited greatly from the services rendered by Nihal De Silva.
I think he is a president of CMA also, CMA Sri Lanka.
Okay. He's, I see. He has served as at CMA Sri Lanka as president. Yes. Fine, thank you. Let's move on to our next recipient of this award of recognition, Tyrrell Roche, the General Manager, Finance of Lanka Wall Tiles PLC and Lanka Tiles PLC. He's also the Chief Operating Officer of Swiss Textilon PLC and the Director of Swisstech Aluminium Limited. And he has 25 years of business experience in the fields of management accounting. Jehan Perimpanagam is the next of the recipients, and he serves as CEO of Informate Private Limited and Vice President with John Keels. Jehan is passionate regarding the development of the BPM industry in Sri Lanka and believes in making a difference through business. He's a much sought after speaker on topics such as ERP systems, leadership, and personality development. That's Jehan Perimpanagam. We have an overseas recipient in Mariam Riza. Now, her work spans accountancy member organizations, the not-for-profit sector, and education. And she has been named as one of the 50 most influential women in the ANZ and ASEAN region. And she is an award-winning international and intergenerational strategist and international speaker on human capital engagement at Wattleshare in Australia. And she also lectures in areas such as ethics, governance, and sustainability for academic and professional programs. That's Mariam Riza. Professor Dayananda Ambalang Murage. He's a professor in accounting at the Department of Accounting, Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce at the University of Sri Jawaharlal. Currently, he's a member of the governing board of the Techno-Economic Societal Sustainable Development Training in Sri Lanka, known as TESS for short, and co-funded by the European Union is TESS. He has undertaken and performed many consultancy assignments involving research, capacity building, and so on. That's Professor Ambalang Murage. And finally, in our list of those recipients is Professor Roshan Ajwal, Professor in Accounting, Department of Accounting, Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce. And he's held that office for around 15 years. And he read for his PhD at the prestigious Waseda University in Japan. Professor Ajwal has many individual and joint international research publications, including publications in refereed journals such as the Japan Finance Journal and the Japan Management Accounting Journal, and has contributed vitally in many areas of corporate governance, auditing, ethics, and financial reporting. So that's the range of our 12 recipients of the CMA Sri Lanka Business Excellence Awards this year, 2021. Which brings us now to the launch of a journal, the Certified Management Accountant September 2021 Journal. And we are happy to be able to present that to you. So this is volume number 6, number 2, a journal covering a range of professional and business articles with interviews with 4 key personalities. And we certainly take this opportunity to extend our gratitude to all who have contributed. And the journal features leading personalities, including General Daya Ratnayaka, a former commander of the Sri Lanka Army, and currently holds the position as Secretary to the Ministry of Industries, and also served as the former chairman of the Ports Authority. Ms. Kasturi Wilson is the Group CEO and General Manager of Hema's Holdings, and definitely helps us to appreciate that women leadership in the corporate sector is a reality, and she epitomizes that. We have Mr. Dinesh Veerakodi, a former chairman of the Hatton National Bank and the Commercial Bank, and currently Chairman International Chamber of Commerce, Sri Lanka. And also Professor Dayantha Wijayasekara, the first Vice Chancellor of the Open University of Sri Lanka, and also former Vice Chancellor of the University of Moratuwa, a leader in the academic profession. We'd like to mention that the journal will be available in e-format on the CMA Sri Lanka website, and we're confident that the journal will provide valuable reading material to all members and readers. So thank you very much for your attention as we focus on that, the launch of the Certified Management Accountants September 2021 journal. And now we have the address by our special guest, certainly no stranger, Professor Ho Yu-Ki. And he's the Associate Provost Skills Future with the Singapore Institute of Technology. And he, as was mentioned, is a member of the Advisory Council for CMA Sri Lanka. And he's associated with the accounting, or professor of accounting, with the National University of Singapore. He has his topic, the word reviving comes up again, reviving the economy post-COVID, the case of Singapore. What can we learn? Professor Ho.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm so grateful for the opportunity where I'm able to share with all of you this lecture on, let me make sure that you get the presentation. I hope we are on the presentation mode, right? So good evening, Professor Lakshman Watawala, Founder, President, CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. Leonard John, President, International Federation of Accountants, Ifax, Honorable Ajith Nivaat Kabra, Governor, Central Bank of Sri Lanka, ladies and gentlemen. It is my utmost privilege to be invited to deliver this address. I must state up front that I'm not a politician or a policy maker or influential policy maker, but I'm merely a keen observer of economics, developments, and the progress of the accounting profession. And above all else, I'm an educator and an academic. I need to apologize in advance for being audacious and presumptuous in presenting this topic, reviving the economy post-COVID-19, the case of Singapore, as if I know how the economy will be revived. I'm also very mindful of the fact that I may run into the danger of presenting a very snobbish Singaporean's view of Singapore. Right. I seek your understanding and forgiveness if in any way, all right, I'm insensitive, careless, or reckless in my sharing. I just like to present a personal view of what the struggles we have in Singapore as we cope with this COVID-19. My agenda for tonight covers 4 areas. 1, Singapore and Sri Lanka facing similar challenges. 2, the impact and the lessons from COVID-19. And thirdly, the challenges facing Singapore in the global economy, which I'm sure is probably the same challenges that Sri Lanka would face. And finally, I'd like to share with you a Singaporean view concerning our struggles to emerge from this COVID-19. So let me start off with Singapore and Sri Lanka facing similar challenges. So this is a very simple comparison in terms of Singapore and Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is about 87 times the size of Singapore. You have a population that's close to 22 million, while Singapore is about 5.6 million. You're probably about 4 times larger than us in terms of humans in the nation. In terms of GDP, you have about 80.7 billion US dollars, while Singapore is about 340 billion US dollars. COVID-19 in 2020 has impacted both of our economy. Singapore's economy has shrunk by 9.2%, while the economy in Sri Lanka is shrunk by 3.9%. Interestingly, when I look at the compounded growth of the economy from 2011 to 2020, both countries experience almost a similar compounded annual growth. What separates us is about 2.6 million kilometers as it is. So if I were to put the key comparative ratios between 1961 to 2020, it gives us a picture concerning the fact that both our economy has almost a common and similar background, right? Back in the 1960s, the GDP of Sri Lanka was almost twice that of Singapore, while its population is 6 times. By 2020, Sri Lanka's GDP is 24% of Singapore, while its per capita income is 6%. I believe one of the major contributing factors, which is for the Sri Lanka's development, is your very painful civil war that lasts for 30 years, that occurred from 1980s to 2010. And I believe that this sets back Sri Lanka for a generation. Singapore is considered extremely fortunate, as the closest that we had in civil war was a racial riot in 1964. However, when we became independent in 1965, we were not sure we would survive. In the 1960s, we do not have a hinterland, neither do we have a hinterland today. Unemployment was rife, public housing was almost non-existent, a population which is highly illiterate, low skill, sanitation and healthcare were poor amongst many other deplorable conditions. I was born in those years in the 60s. As we move forward, what has helped us significantly was a government who builds the nation. We were very fortunate to have a first prime minister in the person of the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, who believes in building the nation with the following pledge, which became the pledge of our nation. And every day when I was a boy in school, we would recite this pledge, namely to build a nation as one united people, regardless of race, language, or religion, to build a democratic society based on justice and equality, so as to achieve happiness, prosperity, and progress for our nation. That is where we have been. The COVID-19 posed a challenge to us as a nation, and it was a challenge that we have never been in this way before. So this is Changi Airport, and I want to take a look at the impact and the lessons from COVID-19. Let me give you an example. In terms of the impact of COVID-19, our air passenger passing through Singapore is represented in this graph. By 2019, we hit a peak of 34.1 million people for a population of 6 million that pass through our air traffic every year as it is. If we were to use a simple estimation that each of these passengers were to spend US $100, the revenue from these air passengers alone will be $3.4 billion US. COVID-19 struck, and in 2020, the number of air travel passengers was down to $5.8 million. This was a significant decline of 83%. And if I were to use the same revenue assumption, this alone meant a loss of $2.8 billion US in revenue. The flow-through effect was much, much more, as COVID-19 affected every sector of the economy and every walks of life. The once bustling world #1 Changi Airport became a ghost town. And for the first time in the national history, at least one terminal was closed to save costs. What then should we do in this pandemic? One of the most important things I think we can do for this pandemic is not to waste a pandemic, but to reflect on the learning and the lessons from this never seen before national and global crisis. I would like to suggest that these are some of the key lessons we have learned. As a nation, we suddenly realized the fragility of the economy. Our core businesses, which has been built over the years, suddenly grind to a halt. The bustling Changi Airport became a ghost town. instead of being a money-making machine, it became a significant liability just to keep it operational every day. Our tourism, our F&B, our hospitality industry, our Formula F1 race were all cancelled as it is. What else did we face? There was significant supply chain disruption. For example, for the first time in Singapore, our supermarket that sells toilet paper ran out of toilet paper. Right? The instant noodles were sold out. Singapore highly dependent upon foreign labels. Our access to the human capital was threatened, from construction workers to domestic helpers to nurses and to the IT specialists from various countries. Our access to materials, in which we import 97% of our food supply. All these suddenly grinds to a halt. Our largest land bridge to Malaysia was closed. And for the first time, we have to rethink through our entire supply chain concerning our food. The importance of technology and infrastructure became a reality. And we must say that we were grateful that we have invested in infrastructure and technology, because that infrastructure and technology allows us to avoid a 1 year of total shutdown of all our education system. Because our schools were able to continue to function, to work, to have what is so-called home-based learning or online learning. The university pivoted to online examination in order to allow progression and learning to carry on. Otherwise, we will suffer from many nations in which 1 whole year of education will have to be repeated. For the first time, we were grateful for a healthcare system, one that we have taken for granted, in which the healthcare system was set up. We built what we so-call our National Center for Infectious Diseases, just opened in 2019 with 300 beds. The world thought that we were crazy to build such a large infectious disease center as it is. And lo and behold, in the COVID-19, it was fully filled. One of the things that we over time have taken for granted is that of the community harmony. In the sense that when COVID-19 struck, racial tension can be an issue. The good news was the community remains harmonious, and each one of us were coming out of our way to build a more resilient and harmonious community. One of the things we have discovered too was mental resilience, as we have found that the working from home, the isolation from community and interaction with each other created many mental challenges in which our population struggles with. There was plenty of soul searching as the ordinary way of life was totally disrupted. Our political leaders were most conscious of this. And in the middle of the pandemic, in 2020, the government called an election. And in that election, it was to obtain a mandate from the people concerning how the government was managing the COVID-19 and Singapore as a whole. The government was returned with a resounding approval from the population. And this provided us the political stability to carry on to manage this COVID-19. One of the key words that was repeated constantly during the pandemic is the word pivot. COVID-19 forces us to pivot to areas or practices which we previously would not have the incentive to venture or consider. For example, Zoom meetings or virtual conferences have always been deemed as inferior or undesirable. COVID-19 forces us to recognize this mode of meeting as a mode that allows us to continue business as usual. Our accounting firms has always invested in IT technology. For the first time with the lockdown, we were able to move quickly to cloud computing, in which the accounting firm were able to continue their auditing work through non-personal contact. That means they don't have to go to the site of the customers or the clients in order to conduct verifications of the documents. So these are some of the important lessons we have learned, not to waste a pandemic. So now moving forward, what are the challenges facing Singapore in a global economy? Let me walk down memory lane. My first encounter with Sri Lanka was in 2014 when Professor Watawala invited me to Sri Lanka to give a talk. And the talk then was, what will it take Sri Lanka to become an economic powerhouse like Singapore? And this was one of the slides that I presented then. I noted 6 possible drivers of Singapore's success. 1, a stable and efficient government. 2, an advancement and promotion based on meritocracy. 3, we are a strong believer in a market-driven economy. 4, pursuit of excellence characterize every child, characterize us as a nation, as an individuals. And a significant investment we make in terms of education and infrastructure. And the last and the 6th driver, which is very relevant to us in tonight's topic and in COVID-19, was the ability to adapt to a changing world. How much has the world changed? This is what we have as adapting to a changing world, the trade winds and trade routes. Singapore as a whole knows that as the trade wind and trade routes changes, our national psyche, our national survival can be threatened. So we work extremely hard to constantly and continuously build hubs to ensure that the trade routes and the trade winds will constantly blow across our nation. We work on Singapore in terms of being a hub, an air hub, a tourism hub, an oil refinery hub, a pharmaceutical manufacturing hub, an education hub, a logistic hub, a healthcare hub, a precision manufacturing hub, an arbitration and mediation hub, and industrial 4.0 hub as it is. So in that sense that we are very cognizant that if we only take a very passive role with regards to the trade winds may just pass us by. And history has shown and told us that no nations, no city-state, no cities have ever survived economically and then socially when the trade routes do not pass through the city-state anymore. Just last Friday, we were given a very rude awakening and understanding of these ever-changing trade winds. Panasonic announced that they will retrench 700 workers in Singapore, that they will shut down some manufacturing operations, but the R&D to remain there. What is the background? You see, the decision came amidst the challenging global business outlook and following Panasonic's strategic review of its refrigeration compressor business. This is a nice way of saying that ultimately Singapore was not cost effective enough, or the business in terms of refrigeration was not sufficiently large enough for Panasonic to justify its continuing investment in Singapore. Panasonic was set up in 1972. They have been with us for almost 38 years as it is, right? You can imagine after such a long period of time, we can take it for granted, but the trade winds move and shift. One of the interesting things in this a newspaper report was the Task Force for Responsible Retrenchment and Employment Facilitation, which was set up primarily during this COVID-19 to ensure that our workers who are displaced will be taken care of. We'll work very hard with the 2 agencies in Singapore, the E2I and the Workforce Singapore, to offer employment assistance such as career coaching and employability workshop. We understand that we cannot control the trade winds, but we can influence the trade wind. And we can also prepare internally to ensure that as a trade wind brings disruption to the economy, we prepare internally to deal with those disruptions. So let me give the other thought pattern. concerning adapting to a changing world. So I want to ask, as we look at the trade winds and the trade routes, I ask a key question. What about the trade winds of Sri Lanka? What are your trade winds? What are your trade routes? What are you doing, or how are you reinventing those trade winds and trade routes? So let me share a bit about concerning our struggles and how we adapt to a changing world. As I mentioned earlier, no state or city has survived when the trade routes were rerouted away from them. So in the sense that I mentioned earlier, sustaining and reinventing the trade winds and the trade routes becomes our national psyche. What do we then do? We look at our core competencies. What are our comparative advantages? What are our USPs, the unique selling propositions? Right? What are we good at ultimately? Where are our comparative advantages? We look at innovation and reinvention. What do we need to do to reinvent new hubs? How can we refurbish the existing hubs to make them more attractive? We look at investments. We look at infrastructure. We look at technology. We look at, for example, the changing need of energy. Singapore is a significant oil refining center in the world. But unfortunately, fossil fuel in due time with the climate change will fall out of favor. What then do you do when the oil refinery business is no longer a key business or desirable business in the world? We look to at our skill label, our competencies, our costs, and our skills. We were very cognizant over the fact that with the per capita GDP of Singaporean, our wages are way above that of our neighbor, right? If our wages are 3 times that of Malaysia or Indonesia, the only way for us to sustain the economic investment in Singapore is that we are at least 3 times or more as productive as the labor in those countries, or we're able through our labor to produce a kind of products and services which cannot be produced by a cheaper competitor as it is. So we have to constantly reinvent our competencies, looking at our costs, and one of the most challenging thing is looking at the skill set of our middle-aged worker, those who are in their 40s and 50s, because they may be saddled with the old technology, the old skills, and when the trade winds change and blow away, they will lose their jobs as it is. We also look at branding Singapore, looking at our political stability, our economic efficiency, our integrity. What can we sell to the world that will bring them here to Singapore? Can we make ourselves to be a competent, fair, equitable mediation and arbitration center of the world as it is? So these are some of the actions or things that we do to relook at the sustaining and reinventing the trade winds and the trade routes that we have. So let me share with you our struggles to emerge from COVID-19. And I like to believe that this may be the same struggle that Sri Lanka has. So the post-COVID, one of the most important thought patterns is to restart the economy, both internally and externally. So we have come to a conclusion that having a 0 infection rate for the economy, it is not possible as it is. So in other words, we will still have to open the economy, bring us back to normality in the midst of a pandemic, and to change the pandemic into an endemic, more like changing a cancer into a common cold. And the government has mapped out for us a very key 3-steps approach. Number 1, vaccination. We have probably hit about 81% in terms of vaccination rate. We have just started the booster shot, right? So hopefully by the end of the year, right, we would probably immunize as many as we can find and vaccinate as many as we can have, and only those for medical reasons could not be vaccinated will not be vaccinated. So that is our first line of defense. Second line is screening and testing. We make ART kit, the PCR kit, to be much cheaper, so that even those who are vaccinated or not vaccinated, the moment they have COVID-19, we're able to screen them, we're able to catch them, and immediately we're able to put them into an isolation to prevent the infection on the rest of the population. We are very clear in our thought pattern that we want to shift the pandemic to become an endemic. Our priorities is to get the people back to work and get us back into the normal way of life. BAU, business as usual. And finally, our steps in restarting the economy is that we need to reopen the border. In 2019, we have 34.1 million air passengers crossing over and pass through Singapore. We were down to 5.8 million people in 2020. We need to rejuvenate, we need to restart the border in order for us to bring us back to where we were, at least as a starting point. So let me basically wrap this up by suggesting 4 things that we want to consider in rerouting the trade winds and the trade routes, particularly post-COVID-19. Number 1, we need to reinvent our education. The COVID-19 gives us a pause in terms of looking at our education. We look at the world that we live in, changing for that matter. We look at the trade winds. We ask, what are the future skills that we need? So what we have done was that we have gone back to look at our 12 years of education from primary to secondary to high school. To look at what are the digital skills that all these 12 years of formal education the students will need. We look at design thinking skills. We look at the soft skills. We look at which part of STEM do we need to further emphasize, or how do we make STEM an interesting knowledge for ladies to pick up. Second thing we look at is how do we reskill the workers? Where are the technology gap? Where are the high value skills? What are the uniquely human skills in which we must be able to train our people such that they will not become obsolete by artificial intelligence, right? We are particularly concerned over those groups that are in their 40s to 50s, because if they are retrenched and if they lose their job, it not only affects them, and if they are breadwinner or the sole breadwinner for the family, and the family of 4 persons, that one retrenched worker will affect 4 lives as it is. We look at the recapitalizing our industry, how we can further push our economy to our industries and our companies and firms to invest in technology, to look at equipment, to look beyond the COVID-19, to expand globally, to have a global outlook. We look at, for example, do we need to do urban farming, right? How do we enhance our stock of fish? We have embarked on this ambitious plan of 2030. By 2030, we want 30% of our fish supplies in Singapore to be grown in Singapore, in a surrounding sea as it is. We look at opportunity for us to rebrand the country. We want to be able to put ourselves up to the world that we are COVID resilient. We are a safe country. Come, for foreign direct investments are always welcome. We give you stability. We are global and outward looking. We're unlike countries in which we will close our door to global trade. We don't. We will open our doors to global trade in order for us to strike deals, which is a win-win proposition for all parties. Allow me to finish tonight's talk, food for thought. In a recent preparation for a lecture that I'm going to give on conflict of interest, and in my research, I came across this very interesting statement and time and again, which says ethical leadership is a key determinant of the success of an organization. I'm going to basically extrapolate that into a nation. The ethical leadership is a key determinant of the success of a nation. And for that, I think Singapore has been very, very blessed and fortunate. We have good ethical leadership that has led us since our founding as it is. In a sense, therefore, we have common prosperities. We're able basically to live all the boats in Singapore as the government lift the tides that lift all the boats. So some food for thought. The COVID-19 has uncovered the vulnerabilities of nations, communities, and businesses. This is what has happened. And we have learned that adapting and pivoting were or are the key countermeasures, right? There is a Cantonese proverb, a dialect, a Chinese dialect that says, when you're riding a horse and when your horse died, what do you then do? You come down and walk. That is what pivoting is all about. And there's a need for urgency and a need for a strategy to restart the economy. And we are working very, very hard to restart our economy. And the fourth point is the understanding the changing trade winds and trade routes. Right? We need to look and stare down at the corridor of time. What are the things that will change? What are the trade routes that will pass us by? And what are the new trade routes we need to reinvent in order to make us relevant? And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to leave you with 4 keywords. And the 4 keywords are reinvent, reskill, recapitalize, and rebrand. I hope these 4 keywords will help you to tunnel our way out of this COVID-19. So thank you very much for the privilege and opportunity to share with you this session. Thank you.
What an outstanding presentation, Professor Ho, and we are deeply grateful for not the words spoken, but the accent or the emphasis that was placed, a practical, analyzed approach. And this is not something that politicians can do. The general policymakers may also fail, but professionals can understand, comprehend, and devise a way forward, strategize, and implement the plan. So we really appreciate the value of that one word, pivot, which does not allow room for wishful thinking, but action. Pivot. Thank you for reminding us of the value of that. And also amongst the nitty-gritty, the closing remarks at those key words that you felt were necessary for us all to keep in mind. Yes, but the nitty-gritty hangs on competencies. Again, not wishful thinking, but competencies. And that $1 million question, or is it a $1 billion question? What can we sell to the world that will attract businesses and investment to Sri Lanka? What is it that we can sell? Oh yes, plenty to think about. As the final slide was titled, it was food for thought. Now it's time for digestion. We conclude with the remarks that will be addressed by the Vice President CMA Sri Lanka, Mr. H.M. Hennayaka Bandara, and we invite him to take over as we conclude this session.
Thank you, Arun. Our chief guest, Mr. Ajit Niwad Cabral, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, keynote speaker, President, International Federation of Accountants, special guest, Associate Provost, Singapore Institute of Technology, Founder President CMA, members of the Council, distinguished invitees, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege today as the Vice President of CMA to propose this vote of thanks to such a distinguished participant after successful conclusion of inauguration of the conference. Dear Governor, we are aware of the very tight schedule that you maintain, and notwithstanding such duties, for having consented to grace this occasion as the chief guest, we are very grateful to you. You have been a close friend of our institute, having graced functions and events organized by us in the past in your capacity as the Governor of the Central Bank and the Honorable State Minister of Money and Capital Market State Enterprise Reform. And we are indeed fortunate to have you with us at this very important occasion. On the assumption of duties as the new governor 2 weeks ago, we have seen that you have met major stakeholders and participated for several webinars and discussions to appraise the economic challenges ahead of us. The 2 interviews given, one to Bloomberg News and the other to local TV channel immediately after the new appointment, explained the economic policy program of the government. While congratulating on your new appointment, we look forward to seeing a blueprint of new economic policy framework in the interim roadmap, which is to be announced on 1st of October. On behalf of CMA and the accountancy profession, we greatly appreciate your participation and explaining the measures intended to take in reviving Sri Lankan economy. We look forward to your support in our future event as well. It is very significant that we have today the keynote speaker, Mr. Alan Johnson. You have a close relationship with our institute in your capacity as the president of International Federation of Accountants, and your participation at this conference, Inauguration, is highly valued and deeply appreciated. I may add that Mr. Allen is the 4th successive Ifax president to participate at conferences or seminars hosted by our institute. His all 3 predecessors, Ms. Olivia, Ms. Rachel, and Dr. Inky, have supported us in the past with their personal presence at our conferences. They have traveled halfway across the globe, but Mr. Allen was not able to be with us physically due to the travel restrictions. Mr. Allen, in his keynote speech, emphasized the critical roles professional accountants in business and management accountants can play and the necessity to have right people and tools in reviving the economy. We thank you for readily including our conference in your itinerary and honoring us with your participation as the keynote speaker. We look forward to working closely in the future as well. Let me also thank our guest speaker, Professor Ho, Associate Professor, Singapore Institute of Technology, for accepting our invitation and joining with us from Singapore to deliver the guest speech on the topic reviving the economy post-COVID case of Singapore. Professor Ho has been a regular speaker in our annual conferences in the past. Your participation in this inauguration is a tower of strength to all of us, and I'm sure that the knowledge shared and the practical examples highlighted will immensely benefit to our policymakers and members to make use of the opportunities and deal with future challenges. Let me also thank our President, Chairman Conference Committee, Professor Lakshmana Vatavela, a national-minded strategist, for highlighting the role of professional management accountants in reviving the Sri Lankan economy and the guidance and the leadership provided in organizing this conference. I also would like to appreciate the contribution of members of the conference committee, council members, CMA team headed by Chief Executive Officer, in particular, Secretary of the Conference Committee, Mrs. Shanti Maheshwaran, for the support extended in organizing this event. Let me also thank all session chairmen, co-chairmen, speakers, and panelists of technical sessions for your participation and accepting our invitation. I take this opportunity to congratulate those who have received the CMA Business Excellence Awards in recognition of the contribution made by them in their respective fields. My best wishes to all of you. Finally, I would like to thank members of the Institute, all distinguished invitees, for your participation and the enthusiasm shown to join in, and for making this inauguration a grand success. I wish you all a very productive and meaningful deliberations over the technical session. Thank you. Stay safe and take care. Good night. Over to Arun.
Yes, thank you. And the final word, if there is one, is that there is going to be a group photograph involving all of the recipients of those special awards. So I think the facility will be online, or should we say via Zoom, and those that were the recipients will remain even as the others log off from this particular session. All the very best with the sessions tomorrow.
They should raise the hands so that we can take them in.
That's right. Now, if you raise the hands, that will be possible, or rather enable Professor Vatavara to move you all to another room, as the saying has it, on Zoom to facilitate the taking of the photograph. So I'll leave that with you. Raise your hands. Professor Vatavara will then select you and move you to the room. And then while your cameras are on, at an appropriate signal, a photograph will be taken. So I'll leave that with you, and all the very best. And again, good night to all.
I think one or two more to come. Just the Korea. Okay. Let's see how many all have come now. Okay. Atula is there. Ref is there. Can you all open your video, all of you all, for the photograph? Atula, then Nanda Korea, Roshan Najwad. I think Alan, if you also can open for a few minutes, I don't know how your timing is. Channa, please open. Dayananda, Asita. Right. Let me see any missing. Nihal, you are there, right? Anyone missing? Okay. Nihal is there, Atula is there, Channa. Asita, Nanda, Ref. Dayananda, Asita, right. Tarindu, can we take the photographs?
Yes, sir, I'm taking.
Alan, can you also you open your video? Then Hennaka, please open.
Hold on, sir. Hold on, sir. Now I'm taking.
Smoldering intensity? It's this stupid crazy man. There it is. Hey, you okay? You having a heart attack? His whole left side is shit, man. Hey, look at me. Weakness? Switchblade. Switchblade? And that's new.
Jason didn't have any weaknesses last time.
Yeah, pull the hell out of me.